The events that you've just seen were inspired by true events. They didn't happen exactly as they were depicted, but in the year 1539 in Bedburg, Germany, there was a man just like the one you've just seen that did, in fact, commit crimes like you've just witnessed. This man was tried, found guilty, and executed for murder, torture, and cannibalism. He did all of these heinous crimes towards women and, yes, even children. His name was Peter Stumpp, and he is known across Germany as the Werewolf of Bedburg. Peter Stumpp, or as it's well believed, his name was actually Abel Griswold, was a wealthy Rhenish farmer who lived in the Bedburg area. He had a wife that died suddenly, but from his marriage he did have a daughter, a young daughter by the name of Belle. Now he and Belle lived on their farm in Bedburg, and the way that we are aware of this man and his crimes is by another man by the name of Montague Summers. He was a clergyman and an occult researcher, ironically. He, like most of us, wanted the truth. He liked to unearth documents and stories about the paranormal, and this was one of them. He unearthed the 16-page pamphlet wrote about Stumpp and his crimes and his execution on the fitting date of October 31st, Halloween of 1539. Now, the 16-page pamphlet is in fact real, and it is in a London museum in England. What this page tells us is that Stumpp believed that he had made a deal with Satan himself and obtained a special girdle or belt that he would put on, which would transform him into a wolf-like beast. Half man, half beast. This is where the legend of the werewolf comes from, about him. Now, there are witnesses that claim to have seen Stumpp put on this belt and transform into a wolf. There are also other witnesses that claim they saw him take it off and transform back into a human. Now, it's believed and confessed by Stumpp that while he was in this wolf form, he would go around, and this is when he would commit the murders. It was also believed that while he was a wolf, he committed the cannibalism as well. He would mutilate his victims and then eat them right after he killed them. Now, Stumpp's victims, he has a whopping 14 of these victims were women. 2 were pregnant women. And while he was eating these 2 women, he also ate their unborn fetuses. His last victim was, sadly enough, his own son. This son came about because for years, he sexually abused his own daughter, which resulted in her giving birth to a baby boy. Now, later in this child's life, Stumpp decided that he was going to kill his only son. So, he killed his son, cut open his skull, and feasted on his brains. Not even family was safe from this man. He also, during his murder spree, took on a mistress who, it is believed, knew about the murders and stayed with him nonetheless. Now, not very much is known about Stumpp from the early years in his childhood. The only thing that is known is that he had a fascination with the dark arts and magic, demonology, everything dark. This little child loved it, which obviously followed him into his adult years. We don't know his birth date, not mysteriously, of course. The only reason we don't know is because a lot of the registries in the church at the time were destroyed years later in the 30 Years' War that lasted from 1618 to 1648. But because of this pamphlet and Mr. Summers, we know his fitting date of death on Halloween of 1539. Now, when they caught on to Stumpp, they wanted to make sure that he would suffer for the crimes that he committed. Oh, and he did. He had the fitting sentence of being executed by the breaking wheel, or the Catherine wheel, as some call it. Now, what they did is they would strap your wrists and your ankles to a giant wagon wheel. They would take a sledgehammer and proceeded to brutally beat your limbs until your bones were dust. Now, this wouldn't kill anybody. This would just put them in a great deal of pain. What they would then do is they would take the person that was on the wheel, broken bones and all, and hoist them into the air on a pole, where they would leave them there to die. Now, they of course would die of dehydration and starvation unless the birds got to them first. Now, this is what awaited Peter Stumpp as they caught him. Now, he was placed on the wheel. His arms and legs were beat profusely with this sledgehammer. Now, instead of hoisting him and letting the birds feed on his entrails, instead what they did was, right when he was wishing that he was dead from all the pain, they cut his head off and they placed it on a pike. Now, what they did with his body is they unstrapped it from the wheel and they threw it into a pyre, along with his mistress and daughter Belle. They were executed simply for just having sexual intercourse with the man. They were previously strangled and killed, and their bodies were thrown in with his. Now, this pike with his head, there was also a symbol of the breaking wheel placed on the pike below his head, and a symbol of a wolf. And this pike was placed in the middle of town. This would discourage anybody in the village of Bedburg from enacting in the dark arts, Satanism, demon studies, and yes, even trying to turn into a werewolf. Because back then, they believed it was possible. Because I'm sure everybody has heard about the infamous witch trials that swept across Europe and eventually found its way into the United States in the town of Salem. Now, many women, men, and children lost their lives because they were falsely accused of practicing witchcraft and being witches. There was also another trial that was going on around the same time, if not earlier, still going on, and it was the werewolf trials. And Peter Stumpp, or Abel Griswold, hoisted himself to the front of the line at the werewolf trials, because there were others that were tried and convicted and executed for being werewolves. But Peter Stumpp, Abel Griswold, his name was feared by many people because of what he did and how long he did it and how many people he was able to kill. Now, like I said before, there were people that claimed that they saw Peter or Abel commit these crimes while he was a wolf, or a half-man, half-wolf beast. Now, whether or not these people were telling the truth, or whether they were saying it to make sure that a guilty man got what he deserved, or if they were just simply trying to get attention, the truth of what they saw is more than likely lost to history because they are long dead and gone. But when you have a large amount of people coming forward saying that this man turned into a wolf or something of that nature, you have to sit and wonder, were all of them really lying? Or was one person, or two, or five, actually telling the truth? That they saw this man transform into something that we only thought were in our nightmares. I'm going to let you decide that. But whether or not Peter Stumpp actually had a magic belt from Satan himself to turn him into a werewolf, and whether or not, while in this wolf form, he ran around killing and torturing women and children on the countryside and eating them, consuming their bodies, we may never know. But one thing is for sure. The story of Peter Stumpp, or Abel Griswold, the werewolf of Bedburg, Germany, is something that is truly of the paranormal and the supernatural.